If you've been feeling like something's wrong in your life, like something's holding you back, this video is for you, because the truth is harsh, but it needs to be said. There are people smiling at you and stabbing you in the back, and worse, there are enemies you can't even imagine, working silently to destroy your plans, your peace, your life. But today, you'll learn a spiritual weapon that changes everything. Psalm 35. It's not a pretty prayer. It's a direct confrontation with evil. Reciting Psalm 35 in the morning isn't just any prayer. It's an act of war. It's you calling on God to fight for you. And when God enters the battle, the enemy's plans crumble. Doors open out of nowhere, dishonest people walk away, stalled deals unravel, and everything that seemed unfair begins to turn in your favor. But there's one thing. It's not just any old way. There's a right time, a right way to pray, and you'll discover that now. This video will show you why Psalm 35 works, how to use it correctly, and why it's feared even in the spiritual world. Get ready, because after watching it to the end, you'll never go a day without reciting this prayer. Your future is being silently attacked, but God will teach you today how to protect what's yours and turn things around. Stay until the end. You'll understand why so much bad was happening, and how God will begin to turn things around today. Now that you understand how Psalm 35 can shield your life and destroy attacks that were holding you back, the next step is simple. Strengthen your journey. This content gave you direction, opened your eyes, and gave you a spiritual weapon many people don't even realize exists. Now it's your turn to make this reach more people. Like the video and subscribe to the channel, because those who receive something this powerful share it, strengthen it, and grow together. And the next videos will give you even more strategies to keep your life protected and your steps firm toward your purpose. You know those days when you wake up with a heavy heart, a bit stuck inside as if there's a cloud hanging over your head and you can't even explain why? It feels like something invisible is holding you back, preventing things from flowing, and even without any logical explanation, you sense something is wrong. Some people think it's just fatigue or coincidence, but anyone with even a modicum of spiritual sensitivity knows this is a sign of a battle taking place in the invisible world. And that's where one of the most powerful weapons in existence comes in, but one that few use with the right intensity and understanding. Psalm 35. This psalm isn't just a pretty prayer, the kind you read quickly and walk away thinking you've done your part. Psalm 35 is a battle cry. It's a cry for help from someone who is being wronged, persecuted, betrayed, from someone who is being battered by life without knowing where the blows are coming from. David wrote these words in a moment of deep anguish, surrounded by enemies who wanted to destroy him, and yet he didn't remain silent. He went straight to God and asked, "Lord, enter this war for me." This is incredibly powerful, because today so many people live like David, surrounded by invisible attacks, false friendships, envy disguised as praise, doors that close without explanation. And what's more, some people are praying wrong. Seriously, some people think they're praying, but in reality, they're just venting into the air, without authority, without faith, without a stance. That's why praying Psalm 35 in the morning makes all the difference. The morning is the most strategic time of the day. It's there that you define your path, what you'll allow spiritually. When you wake up and connect with God using a psalm that calls on Him to defend you, the enemy can't remain. God acts, and He truly does. Things begin to change. Unhelpful people begin to walk away. Difficult environments clear, and even things that had been stuck for a long time begin to flow again. And look, I say this because I've experienced it firsthand. There are situations where you clearly realize this was God stepping in. It's real. Now, of course, many people just recite Psalm 35 like reading a cake recipe, hoping that the simple act of repeating the words will bring magic results. But it's not like that. There's a secret here that few people discuss. Psalm 35 needs to be prayed with understanding, with commitment. It's praying like someone who knows they're at war, someone who knows something is trying to destroy their future, someone who refuses to be passive in the face of evil. Have you ever stopped to think why certain doors always close in your face? Have you ever felt that every time you start to prosper, something happens and knocks you back to square one? This may not be just coincidence. It could be spiritual sabotage. And until you treat it seriously, the cycle will continue. Now, when you recite Psalm 35 upon waking, you're taking a stand. You're saying to the spiritual world, "Not here, not today, I am protected by God." And if there's one thing I've learned from great men of faith like Pastor David Yonggi Cho, it's that the spiritual world reacts powerfully when you pray with real specific faith. He always spoke of the importance of praying clearly, with conviction, knowing exactly what you're asking God for. And when you take a psalm like this, which is a combative prayer, and use it right at the beginning of your day, you don't just protect yourself. You pave the way for God's favor to go first, knocking down everything that tries to slow you down. Now, let me ask you a direct question. Have you ever recited Psalm 35 with this awareness? Have you ever stood spiritually in the morning with authority, declaring that God is your shield against all that is hidden and treacherous? Comment below. Protected. If you want to start this practice and protect yourself every day, let's create a movement of people who have awakened spiritually and understand that the day begins with victory in the invisible before anything happens in the visible. And you know what impresses me most? It's that once you start praying like this, with this awareness, you realize that many things that seemed ordinary were actually distractions. Some people come into your life just to distract you. Some opportunities appear good, but they're just traps. And some decisions you can only avoid making mistakes. When your heart is aligned with God early on, therefore this prayer isn't for any time. It's not to be said haphazardly. It's to be said with intention, with dedication. And the best time is early in the morning, before your cell phone, before the rush, before your mind fills with noise. It's you and God straight to the point saying, "Lord, defend me today. Deliver me from the attacks I don't see. Fight for me." Some people say, "Oh, but I don't see anything wrong happening." And that's where the danger lies. The most dangerous enemy is the one that hides. It's the one that acts behind your back silently. As you live your life, it works to sabotage your future. And before you know it, you've already lost a true friendship, entered into a bad relationship, and closed a door that was yours. But when you pray, God reveals it. God confounds the enemy's plans. God unmasks. God nips evil in the bud before it even grows. And that's where the game changes. When you understand the weight of this prayer and begin to pray it with conviction, you can no longer remain the same person. Something within you awakens. You begin to notice the signs, the changes, the deliverances. And best of all, you feel stronger, more grounded, more secure, because you know you are not alone, that God is fighting for you, and that no weapon forged against your life will prosper. And that, my friend, changes everything. Now, there's another little discussed detail that's directly linked to this type of prayer. Something that, when combined with Psalm 35 in the morning, creates an even stronger layer of spiritual protection, and which you need to understand before continuing your journey. We'll talk about this in the next part, because this is precisely where many people go wrong. They use the right weapon but forget something fundamental. And that's what I'll show you next. You may even know Psalm 35. You may even have recited it a few times, but the truth is that prayer without spiritual positioning is just noise. Many people kneel, pray, cry, and cry out, but deep down they're filled with doubt, fear, and insecurity. And then, even with beautiful words, nothing happens. Because it's not how much you pray, it's how you position yourself while praying. There's a huge difference between talking to God and positioning yourself spiritually before Him. It's one thing to vent, another to declare war on what's oppressing you. And here comes one of the most powerful principles I learned. From studying the teachings of great spiritual leaders, faith without action is dead. There's no point in repeating Psalm 35 if you don't believe that God is truly listening to you and acting in that very moment. The enemy already knows you're going to pray. He just doesn't expect you to pray with living faith, with authority, with conviction, because he fears that. When you get up spiritually in the morning and pray with faith, you're saying to the spiritual world, "Today won't be like yesterday. Today I know who is with me." And this declaration moves heaven. But there's a detail that few people realize. Most people pray for deliverance, for justice, for God to overthrow their enemies, but they continue to live as if they were weak, as if they were defeated. And then nothing changes. Why? Because what sustains prayer, it's not the request, it's the posture of the person praying. It's the tone of spiritual authority. It's knowing that God is Father, but also Judge, that He is love, but also a consuming fire. And when you understand this, your prayer changes level. Psalm 35 is not a light prayer. It is direct, intense, and powerful. It cries out for justice, for intervention. It is a psalm of someone who is being unjustly attacked, but instead of trying to take revenge with their own hands, they decide to hand the fight over to God. And that, my friend, is spiritual positioning. It is recognizing that you are under attack, but refusing to act in the flesh. It is trusting that God will fight for you. And more than that, declare it aloud in prayer, without fear, without hesitation. And do you know why this is so powerful? Because most people lose their battles before they even leave the house. They wake up, grab their phones, are already filled with worries, and connect with the world before connecting with God. Then they face the day spiritually unprepared, vulnerable, fragile. And then they wonder why nothing goes right. But when you start the day with your mind aligned, your heart firm, and your faith in place, you don't just face the day, you rule it. You take spiritual control of your journey. Now let me ask you something serious. Have you been praying as someone who truly trusts, or as someone who is trying to see if it will work? Because this doubt, this "let's see what happens," is what paralyzes many lives. And here, I want you to comment on the word authority. If you understand that the time has come to change your spiritual posture, write it down. Because this is more than a word. It's a position. There are people who complain about life, about injustice, about betrayal, closed doors, slander, but when they have the chance to take a stand, to rise spiritually, they prefer neutrality. And neutrality in the spiritual life is a loophole. Those who don't take a stand become easy targets. That's why the prayer of Psalm 35, said with active faith, isn't for everyone. It's for those who understand that life is war, that the spiritual world is real, and that you can't leave home without being protected. And here's a truth that may hurt but will set you free. There are things that you will only overcome when you stop asking and start declaring. There are prayers that aren't about asking, they're about determining. And Psalm 35 is exactly that. It's you saying, "Lord, fight for me, do justice, confound those who persecute me, strike down those who would destroy me behind my back." It's not arrogance, it's faith. It's not arrogance, it's positioning. And this kind of faith, as David Yonggi Cho said, creates an atmosphere where miracles happen, where the supernatural becomes natural. Because God responds to this kind of attitude. God honors this kind of faith. And speaking of faith, there's something even deeper that many people overlook, something that, when put into practice, enhances the power of this morning prayer and prepares the spiritual environment in such a way that even those who hate you avoid you for no apparent reason. This isn't just about what you say in prayer, but about what you decide to do together with prayer. And that's what we're going to talk about now, because there's a principle that, when you activate it, completely changes your spiritual level and the way God acts on your behalf. There comes a time when prayer alone isn't enough. Yes, I know this may sound strange to hear, but listen up. Prayer without surrender moves nothing, and there are certain battles that require more than words. They require renunciation, dedication, sacrifice. And that's where one of the most powerful spiritual weapons in existence comes in, fasting. But not a mechanical fast, done out of religiosity or routine. I'm talking about a fast with purpose, the kind you do when you realize you're at war and can't continue living any old way. There are situations in life that only change when you show God, through your actions, that you are 100% committed. Fasting is exactly that, a spiritual act of humility and urgency. It's as if you were saying, "God, this is too serious, I won't be distracted. I need your intervention now." When you combine the prayer of Psalm 35 with an intentional fast, you are telling heaven and hell that you no longer accept being manipulated by the invisible. It's you giving up comfort to seek answers, to break chains, to accelerate God's action. And look, I'm not talking about fasting as a bargaining chip with God, okay? It's not a matter of, "I do this, the Lord gives me that." It's about focus, it's about intensity. It's about showing that you're spiritually aligned to deal with the battle you're facing. Because some struggles aren't simple. There are attacks that come from afar, that are ancient, truly spiritual, and are so well hidden that you don't even notice them anymore. It seems like just bad luck and a bad phase, but it's not. It's a plot. It's the enemy's plan, which has been in place for years. And to break this, it takes more than a 5-minute prayer with your phone on vibrate. Now, what many people don't understand is that fasting has an incredible power to illuminate what's hidden. During the fast, you step away from confusion, silence your flesh, and begin to notice things you've been overlooking. God begins to show you who's truly on your side and who's draining your energy. You begin to remember situations that seemed small, but were signs. And the craziest thing, doors that were closed begin to creak. People who were holding you back begin to leave. Fasting cleanses. Fasting opens. Fasting accelerates. And there's more. When you fast and pray with Psalm 35, your spiritual voice gains strength. It's as if God looks at you and says, "There's someone who's serious." Because heaven moves before those who surrender completely. And then what was taking years to happen begins to happen in days. What seemed impossible begins to unfold naturally. It's as if God opens a path where before there were only stones, thorns and discouragement. And you feel it in your soul, its lightness, its direction, its clarity. You know that feeling of, now it's going to happen? This is it, because now it's God who's paving the way, and you're no longer carrying the weight alone. But it's important to say something here. Fasting isn't just about not eating. Fasting is about cutting out excesses. It's about silencing voices. It's about saying no to meat to better hear God's voice. It can be food, yes, but it can also be your cell phone, social media, television, distractions that take you away from His presence. And the more specific your fast is, the more aligned you become with heaven. And it doesn't have to be a 40-day fast, no. It starts with purpose. One day, part-time, but with focus, with surrender. And then you combine this with Psalm 35 in the morning and begin to declare, "Lord, defend me, deliver me, enter into my cause." It's so powerful. And there's one more thing no one talks about. Fasting cuts through pride. It breaks that ego that prevents us from recognizing our need for help. When you fast, you humble yourself spiritually. And the Bible is clear. God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. And it's this grace you need to win. Because there's no point in having talent, intelligence, or opportunity if you're being sabotaged by a force you can't see. But when you combine prayer and fasting, you begin to live a different reality. And it's no coincidence. It's a spiritual strategy. And let me tell you something very straightforward. There are victories that are being held back because you're still trying to win them with the strength of your arm. But what God wants to show you is that the strength that wins is that of the Spirit, not of the flesh. And fasting puts you in that place. It breaks the rhythm of the world and puts you in the rhythm of heaven. And when you start your day like this, fasting, praying with authority, no plan of the enemy will stand. God tears it down. God cleanses. God rebuilds. Now, if you've made it this far, I need to ask you a question that could change the way you live in the coming days. Are you willing to step out of your spiritual comfort zone and truly enter this war for your own life? Because in the next point, I'll show you a secret almost no one talks about, a silent pattern that repeats itself in the lives of those under spiritual attack, and that goes unnoticed, even by those who pray. And that's where many lose the battle without even realizing it. Have you ever had that strange feeling that something is wrong but you can't explain it? Like everything seems normal, but inside you feel a weight, a restlessness, an uneasiness? It feels like there's something in the air, something watching you, something blocking things for no reason. And so you try to ignore it, carry on with your routine, but deep down, you know there's something behind it. Something working against you without you being able to see it. Well, yes, there's a name for that. Hidden enemies. And I'm not just talking about people here. Yes, there are fake people around, there are envious people, there are people who want what's yours, but the problem is deeper. There's a spiritual level to this war that operates in the shadows. These are feelings that surround you out of nowhere, thoughts that aren't yours, doubts that arise out of nowhere, fatigue that can't be explained. These are invisible pressures that drain your energy, make you doubt your worth, your faith, your own story. And all of this happens because the enemy knows the most efficient way to stop you. It's not with scandal, it's with slow wear and tear. It slowly creeps in. It uses people, environments, comments, even internal thoughts to undermine your strength, your faith, your clarity. And before you know it, you're exhausted, discouraged, complaining about life, accepting situations you never would have tolerated before. It's at this point that many people give up praying, distance themselves from God, and give up without even realizing it. So what? Who won? The enemy, not by force, but by spiritual fatigue. And you know what's worse? This exhaustion comes precisely when you need to be firm the most, precisely when you're close to a turning point, an answer, a blessing. It's at this moment that the atmosphere begins to feel tense, that people around you begin to irritate you for no reason, that thoughts of giving up arise. Have you noticed this? It's standard. It's the enemy's strategy. And that's why Psalm 35 isn't just a prayer for protection, it's a battle cry against these invisible forces trying to steal what's yours. When you pray this psalm, you're saying, enough, it's over. I no longer accept being spiritually manipulated. And here comes a point that few people talk about, but that makes all the difference. Constancy. You know that thing about praying once and expecting everything to work out? That's an illusion. The spiritual world respects those who take a stand and those who remains. When you pray consistently, you demonstrate spiritual maturity. You demonstrate that you understand the game. Because the enemy doesn't give up easily. He persists, he returns, he tries again. And your weapon against this is to insist even more on God. Consistency breaks cycles. Consistency disarms traps. Consistency builds invisible walls around you. Praying Psalm 35 once a day is good. Making it a habit is transformational. Because every time you pray with faith and focus, you clear the path a little more. You close gaps, you block attacks, you make room for discernment, and most importantly, you strengthen your spirit. I've seen people who started this practice and within days began to see things that had been right under their noses for years. Fake people, hidden spiritual agreements, emotional ties that were true prisons. The spiritual world reveals itself to those who remain steadfast, and there's no point in rushing. What was built over months or years of oppression won't disappear with a superficial prayer, but with consistency, everything changes. And you notice day after day that your mind is lighter, your energy is returning, your spirit is stronger, that you've regained vision of what once seemed blurry. Now maybe you're wondering, but why does this happen to me? Why so much oppression? Why does it feel like my life is always stuck? And I'll tell you a truth that many people avoid, saying the more light you have, the more darkness tries to erase you. People who carry a calling, who have something great to live for, who have been set apart to fulfill a purpose. These are the ones most attacked, precisely because they are a threat. And that's why it's so important to stay, to pray, to declare, to recite Psalm 35 every day, and to keep going even when you don't see anything changing immediately. And now that you understand this, I want you to comment below on the word watch, because that's what you'll start doing from now on. You'll monitor your thoughts, your emotions, your connections. You'll pay attention to the details. You'll notice who drains you, who strengthens you, who brings you closer to God, and who drags you down. And most importantly, you'll shield your routine with prayer and spiritual guidance. This is where many fall. They think the worst is over. They relax their faith, and the enemy returns with a vengeance. And that's why I'm telling you, doesn't stop. It continues, it goes all the way. Because each prayer of yours, each psalm recited with faith, each fast done with purpose, all of this is building something in the invisible that soon, very soon, will manifest itself out here. And speaking of manifestations, there's a key that changes everything when you start using it in the midst of spiritual battle, something that activates God's move with even greater force, opening your eyes and your paths at the same time. But there's a catch. This practice is overlooked by many people precisely because it seems too simple. And that's precisely what we'll talk about in the next point. Have you noticed how increasingly difficult it is to create deep bonds with people? How everything seems superficial, quick, disposable? The truth is, the more you grow spiritually, the more light you carry, the harder it becomes to find someone who truly connects with you. Because those who live in the shallows can't stand those who dive deep. And here's a point almost no one talks about. True connections are not many, but they are vital. And that's exactly why, when you begin to awaken spiritually, you feel like you're losing people, distancing yourself, becoming more selective. This isn't loneliness. This is protection. People who carry a calling, who live under spiritual warfare, they cannot engage in any conversation, in any friendship, in any environment. And do you know why? Because your soul starts screaming when it's in the wrong place. Your spirit senses when someone else's energy doesn't match yours. You begin to feel an inexplicable discomfort. It could be someone dear, someone close, but you feel something isn't right. This is discernment, and it's also a warning. Don't connect with anyone who doesn't respect your essence. But here comes a huge challenge. Human beings thirst for belonging. We want someone to talk to, someone to rely on, someone to laugh with, someone to share moments with. And when you realize that, most of the connections you have around you are superficial, toxic, or filled with envy disguised as affection, it hurts. It hurts because you realize you've been surrounded by people who were only there for what you gave, not for who you were. It hurts because you remember conversations, outbursts, advice, and then it hits you. A lot of what held you back in life began after a malicious friendship. And you know what's even crazier? When you start reciting Psalm 35 often, when you pray with positioning and fast with focus, these wrong connections start to fall apart on their own. You don't need to argue, fight, or force things. People disappear. They distance themselves. They avoid you. And you don't even need to understand why. Just accept it. This is God cleansing. This is the spiritual sorting through your life. Because there are people who are only around to drain your energy, delay your purpose, and steal your peace. And when God decides to act, He begins by removing the burdens you carried as if they were friendship. So, instead of trying to force ties with those who no longer have anything to do with your journey, start praying for connections that make sense in the new phase of your life. And this isn't self-help talk. It's a spiritual strategy. When you take a stand with faith, God begins to align the right people along the way. He brings people who pray for you, who root for you, who lift you up when you fall. But this only happens when you let go of those who shouldn't be there anymore. And let's be honest, there are people you felt weren't meant to be in your life anymore, but you kept insisting, right? That's right. And the price of this is high. Delay, confusion, stagnation. Now is the time to change that. Comment below the word alignment if you understand that the next level of your life requires true spiritual connections. No more surrounding yourself with those who don't vibrate on the same frequency. No more diminishing yourself to fit in with others. You weren't called to do that. And the more you align with what God wants to do in your life, the more you realize that quantity was never the problem. What you need is spiritual quality in your relationships. And you know what's most transformative? When you start to free yourself from these wrong connections, you realize your spirit breathes, your mind clears, life flows. It's as if God took you out of a stuffy room and opened a window. And it all starts with a decision. Stop insisting on shallow relationships. Stop ignoring the signs. Stop calling friendship what has already become a soul bond. But there's an important detail here that no one talks about, and that's preventing many people from experiencing what God has already prepared. Something that starts small, hidden, but grows inside and becomes an emotional prison. It's subtle, silent, and needs to be exposed before it turns into a bitter root. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about now. There comes a time in life when you stop asking, "Why does everyone leave?" and start to understand that not everyone was made to stay, but until you reach that maturity, you get hit. A lot. Because the truth is that most of the chosen ones carry a deep wound, which almost no one sees, but which shapes almost every decision, relationship, and even prayer, the wound of rejection. And no, this doesn't start in adulthood. It goes way back. Emotional abandonment in childhood, a betrayal you didn't expect, a cursed word that scarred you, a time when everyone turned their backs on you. All of this has built within you a constant feeling that it is not enough, it is not accepted, it is not wanted. And the problem isn't the fact itself, but what it generates spiritually. Because rejection isn't just a feeling, it becomes a kind of invisible chain, preventing you from trusting again, from opening up, from experiencing new connections with ease. It's as if a part of you always expects abandonment. You even get close to someone, but you're already preparing for the moment when that person will disappoint you. You enter a new cycle of fear, insecurity, slowly withdrawing, thinking that at some point the pain will return. And then, without realizing it, you start to isolate yourself, not because people hurt you, but because you already protect yourself before that happens. This is self-defense. It's the mind trying to avoid an old pain, but in practice, it only traps you in a cycle of spiritual loneliness. And the craziest thing is that spiritually speaking, this becomes a loophole. The enemy knows where your pain is, and that's where he attacks. He uses people similar to those who hurt you. He repeats patterns. He makes you believe you're alone because you're not good enough. And that's where a huge danger arises. You start to reject yourself. You begin to disbelieve in your purpose. You doubt your voice. You sabotage yourself. You think that prayer doesn't work, that fasting doesn't solve anything, that Psalm 35 is just another pretty text. But let me tell you something as clearly as possible. God never rejects those who have been chosen. The world may turn its back on you, friends may disappear, family may ignore you, relationships may fall apart. But God will never turn his face away from you. Never. But to feel his presence, you need to heal this wound. And how do you heal it? By starting to see yourself through his eyes, by stopping comparing yourself, by stopping expecting perfection, by stopping carrying the guilt of what others did to you. This isn't weakness, this is healing, spiritual, emotional, and mental healing. And when you begin to position yourself spiritually, reciting Psalm 35, fasting, distancing yourself from toxic connections, and seeking healthy relationships, this healing begins to happen. Because your soul understands that now it is God who validates you, not others. You no longer need to force space where you're not wanted. You no longer need to beg for anyone's attention. You have been called, and those who are called by God do not depend on the world's acceptance. This is liberating, but there's an important detail here, and I'll be very blunt with you. As long as you carry hurt, anger, and resentment toward the people who rejected you, you'll remain trapped. God wants to cleanse that. He wants to pull out those roots. Because this isn't just pain. It's spiritual lockets what's keeping you from trusting him fully. It's what's blocking your complete surrender in prayer. And that's why you need to release forgiveness. Not for others, but for yourself. Because forgiveness loosens chains. Forgiveness lifts weights. Forgiveness allows God's presence to flow freely. And maybe you're there with a heavy heart, remembering all the times you were rejected. I know it hurts, but you're here now reading this. And that's no accident. This is God showing you that the time has come to break this cycle. It's time to heal this wound. It's time to stop running away from people for fear of being hurt. Because there are people who are right for your journey. There is healthy friendship. There is genuine love. But to experience this, you need to free yourself from old pain. Now that you understand why certain cycles repeat themselves and how old wounds silence your spiritual strength, it's clear how much this content helped you see what was hidden and hindering your journey. This turning point you just experienced isn't just about protecting yourself, but about taking a stand. And when the truth sets you free, it transforms. So if this video made you reflect, clarified your vision, gave you direction, or even brought you relief, it's only fair that this transformation reaches more people. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment here. Freedom to show that you're ready to break free from everything that's paralyzed you inside. And look, what comes in the next video will show you what happens in the spiritual world when you break free from a pattern and begin to walk with authority. You can't miss it, because if this has already moved you, what's to come will prepare you for something even greater.